So we're getting ready, as you can see from all the flags, to think about the birth of the church. And so we're looking at passages from the book of Revelation that talk about how the new church was established in the heavens. And in this story, the Lord uses a little child to represent the beginnings of the church, which were, as you know from the work True Christian Religion, we celebrate on the 19th of June, 1770. So I'm reading from chapter 12 of Revelation. Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. And being with child, she cried out in labor and pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail drew 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them to earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth to devour her child as soon as it was born. She bore a male child who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness where she had a place prepared by God that they should feed her there 1,260 days. Wonderful vision, sort of a dream, that the disciple John saw while he was on the Isle of Patmos, and the Lord opened his spiritual eyes, and he saw these strange things about a woman who shone like the sun, and there was a dragon, and she gave birth to a child. And the interesting thing about it is that child was a picture of what was going to be that new church. But remember, it started off with, and it was so small, and like any child, when it's very, very tiny, it could be easily harmed. So there are people who love themselves so much, they don't want to listen to the Lord, and they don't want to see their problems that they have, and they don't want to get rid of their evils. They kind of enjoy them. But even so, they're afraid of this little child. This child who's supposed to rule, because it's a doctrine of life that asks people to change some of the things that they love so they can be better. And so this doctrine of the new church, this little child, is something that the dragon wanted to hurt. But we don't need to be afraid, because what happens is, if anybody was going to, in this room, was going to hurt a little child, what would happen? We'd all jump up and rush after that person who was trying to hurt a child and stop them, wouldn't we? We wouldn't want anybody to get hurt. So it turns out the child actually was pretty fierce himself. He grew up fast in this dream. Look what I have here. We often have kings often have a thing called a scepter, right? And this is actually iron. That's pretty strong. You want to feel it? You want to feel how heavy that is? I'm going to put it down here. You see if you can lift that. Would you like to get whacked with that? You want to feel? Yes, you can try. Can you feel? Heavy, isn't it? Yes. You can't even pick it up. You want to try? A rod of iron, it says. The child he grew up and was big enough. Here we go. You want to try the rod? You want to see if you can pick it up? Feel how heavy that is. Okay, now, so you want to come fight me now? No. You see, he had a rod of iron. So the child had a rod of iron. And the thing is, iron doesn't seem fancy. It's not gold. It's not silver. It's not something valuable. But it's very, 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 very strong. We build big buildings out of iron, right? And so when it talks about that the child, who is a picture of our church, having a thing in his arm, well, a shepherd has a crook somehow. Whenever we think about a scepter or something in someone's hand, we do things with our hands. And if we have a stick, we can reach out and do things even farther. Okay? So the idea is this is a picture of the kinds of power that the Lord's Word has in our minds. This is the kind of protection. So the child, who's the doctrine of the church, and we worry about a new church being formed and the dragon's coming and things are happening, how does the Lord protect it? It's because the things that the Lord teaches in the Word are strong. They're like this iron bar. And if we get those things in our minds, we get these strong ideas in our minds, then we can protect ourselves with them. So that's why the Lord, it says in the dream, that the child had a rod of iron. The Lord's truth has power. We sometimes forget that. We sometimes say, oh, well, it's just a word. How can just a few words in a book have power? And yet think how often it is. If you're feeling bad and somebody comes up and says, I love you, does that have power to change how you feel? Words have power. Words can be mean too. If somebody says something terrible to you, it can make you feel bad. So remember that words have power, just the things that we say. Imagine how much power the things that the Lord has to say. If we read what he says in the Word and use those things to guide our life, we get them in our hand, then we can be courageous because we have the power to protect ourselves from evil. We have the truths of the Lord's Word. And no one's going to mess with us if we have the Lord's Word. That's the thing to remember. That's why the story tells us why the disciple John talked about a child that had a rod of iron, and he was going to rule the nations. And that meant that the ideas that the Lord was teaching were smarter than anything that we have in the world, better than any kind of thing that some person could think up. And they're the things that help us fight the bad thoughts that we get sometimes and help us find our way to heaven. Amen.